Economic development. Listen to these two words, and what do you think of? What does your mind tell you? Economic development. Does it bring out images of happiness? People being lifted from the depths of poverty to new heights of wealth? Indulging people of developing countries with more capital to spend on luxury items, increasing the standard of living, and introducing new technologies? How could anybody be against economic development? It is an idea like marriage or motherhood, without negative connotation. But, in reality, there are negative consequences to economic development. We need only look to the rapid surge of the Chinese economy to see the aspects of development that are many times ignored.
Britain, the United States, and Japan have all gone through periods of enormously rapid industrial growth, and many of them in the course of that have ended up leaving a legacy of pollution that they have subsequently needed to clean up. China has a different situation. It's going through an industrial revolution of its own, which in some ways is happening in a more compressed time frame than those other great powers in history. But it's also got pollution on a scale that those other great powers never quite experienced. There are hundreds of thousands of people in China who are dying every year from pollution-related diseases. The only larger cause of death in China now than pollution-related diseases is smoking.
Beginning in 1979, China began to make several changes to its economy. A transition from a closed market economy to an open market economy took place, meaning that now China could export and import goods globally. Furthermore, there was a shift from a traditionally agrarian-focused economic structure to one that was industrialized. Factories were built, not just in the cities, but in the countryside, to employ farmers into a newly formed industrial workforce. In 2009, this industrial sector contributed to nearly 90% of China's gross domestic product, and was growing on average of 9% per year, an unprecedented level of annual growth. With the booming economy and export-oriented market, China became the factory of the world. Despite the Chinese government's boasts of lifting 660 million citizens out of poverty, there are serious consequences to this economic development. Traditionally, poverty has always been viewed through the lens of exchange value. This means that the poverty level is determined by how much money or exchange value a person makes. In this sense, then it is indeed true that China's economic growth has assisted in the eradication of poverty, but at what cost? The lifeblood of the Chinese economy has been the use of coal. It has accounted for 70% of China's gross domestic product, and usage of coal by China exceeded 3.2 billion tons in 2010. What's worrying is that the use of coal does not show any signs of stopping, and with coal emitting more carbon dioxide than any other fossil fuels, the environmental implications are quite dire. Additionally, factories often dump toxic materials and chemicals into sources of water such as rivers and lakes, which can lead to hazards in the local ecosystems as well as people's health. This is exactly what happened in October 2000, when 9 paper and chemical factories spilled toxic waste into a river, killing thousands of fish and shellfish, destroying the livelihoods of local fish farmers in the process. Similar incidents have increased by nearly 30% from 1994 to 2011 in China. Similarly, an overabundant use of chemical fertilizer has greatly decreased the level of soil quality. Sediment from loose soils robbed of nutrients, fertile topsoil, and surrounding trees spills freely into rivers and streams. This increase in sediment, along with pollution, can cause algae blooms that result in such images as this. Significant blooms such as this can create dead zones in the water, where wildlife is unable to survive, and toxins from algae can infest the water, making it unsafe to use for human consumption. The health costs of pollution in China are self-evident. In 2003, healthcare costs caused by air pollution were estimated to be up to $83 billion, or 3.8% of China's GDP. Every year, 300,000 people die due to exposure to air pollutants, such as fine particulates and ozone. When the smog is thick and air pollution is especially bad, breathing the air in China's major cities can be equivalent to smoking 21 cigarettes, or a pack a day. Small wonder why nobody goes outside without wearing a mask.
16 of the 25 most polluted cities in the world are in China. And in the area of water pollution, they're having problems in a lot of areas with people not having access to safe drinking water. That's leading to problems with health use. Chinese experts and international experts have realized there hasn't been enough focus on the environmental costs of that growth. Everyone knows that pollution has been very serious, but if you can calculate it into the GDP, that really gives people a clearer picture of what you're really achieving. You know, if you actually have a lot of damage to your own environment and you're losing a lot of resources, are you really growing at the amount that you think you're growing?
Obviously, the costs for economic development and a higher paycheck are many in the case of China. Increased development has brought with it increased pollution in water, in air, and in soil. When breathing the air around you is dangerous and drinking water from the tap could make you sick, are the benefits of higher wages and access to new technologies worth it? Perhaps it is time for a different lens to view poverty and a living standard. What if the poverty level was not determined by how much money a person earns, but how healthy they are, their access to nutritious foods, and a clean environment? This is the concept of basic use values, where a person's basic needs are considered rather than earning potential. After all, what do we use money for? For buying what we need to survive. It is certainly a different way of viewing the world, but one that can challenge our perceptions, and maybe even lead to more effective forms of development, and ultimately a new form of wealth. Wealth not defined by money, but wealth defined by happiness. Wealth defined by health and nutrition. Simply wealth redefined.